How did you lose and keep off 100 pounds?
Yeah, that's a good question. One that I get a lot. I was actually wrote a post about this, I think not too long ago. I think the two biggest keys for me was one, when I started off, I wasn't necessarily trying to lose weight. Like I didn't have it going in with the mindset like, oh, I have to lose X amount of pounds. I have to lose 100 pounds. I have to lose 20 pounds in the next 2 months, whatever. It was like, I just went into it with the mindset of, I'm going to try to be more active. Like I just focused on one thing. I really focused on just exercise, being more active, because I wasn't really exercising regularly prior to that. So that's just was really my focus, was to be more active. And after a couple weeks of that, a month, whatever it might be, I was like, oh, I've been very active. I should step on the scale. And so I stepped on the scale, saw that I was down. I don't remember what it was at the time, but I'm like, oh, okay, this is like, I've lost weight consistently. I've just been exercising. This isn't as like hard as I tried to, as I've made it out before in the past. And so that got me just like interested in like, okay, I'm doing the exercise part. Like what else could I be doing better? And so I think that was really the big thing. And I think the other one is like going back to
let me ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
You said something that really stuck out. Like two things. One, like you focused on the process. Like you didn't focus on like, I have to lose 100 pounds in 90 days without counting my macros or whatever, like, hook that you see on social media. You just focused on moving more, right? So like you focused on the process, but then you said it wasn't as hard as you made it out to be in the past. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think because what I had tried to do in the past, like I was a big men's health reader, big reader of like the online forums, fitness things, whatever. And I think in the past, I always tried to attack it from the standpoint of making all these changes at once, like going from not hardly exercising at all to doing something every single day to pretty much just eating whatever I want and not really caring about my diet, to going low carb right off the bat and stuff like that. And I think I would just get burned out really quickly. And so like this time, like unintentionally, I just kind of started by focusing on one thing, something simple, something that at that time in my life was pretty easy for me to get into. And after that became a habit, like that just got, and I think you probably see this a lot with clients too, like that just kind of snowballs into like other habits as well. Yeah, no doubt.
It's the thing about this way, like when you exercise, you tend to eat a little bit healthier versus if you have an all or nothing perspective, like when you're all in, like, yeah, you're dialed into many different areas. You're taking care of your sleep. Maybe you're drinking less, eating less junk food, not having some of these binges, whatever it is. And then there are other times, like if you're completely off, like you don't have that kind of fitness as an anchor, everything else falls by the wayside. And I mean, you and I got way back, right? But like, let's circle back. Like, what was your childhood like, right? Because I mean, dude, you're in awesome shape now. You've lost this weight, you've kept it off, you're strong. What was your childhood like? Because you've made such an incredible transformation from even when I got to know you, 10 years ago to where you're at now.
Yeah. I mean, like my childhood was great. I mean, my dad was a very active person. He ran marathons, but from what I remember in terms of like, tracing back, because I think a lot of our habits with food, exercise, health, whatever, go back to when we were kids and what we learned from our parents and our family and that kind of stuff. But like, food and healthy eating and stuff like that, like we didn't eat bad. We didn't like go to McDonald's or anything like that, but we never really like paid too much attention to in terms of like what we were eating or talked about eating healthy, or like that was a regular part of our family dynamics. And so like, I think the one of the things for me was a lot of times like my dad being into exercise and running and stuff like that would lovingly try to force me to do some of that stuff too. And I just hated it. And so I think that created a very negative cycle around exercise. And I, in football, I was the slowest kid and doing like conditioning and stuff after practice, like, that, like that was never easy for me. And so it just created this negative feedback loop, I think, in terms of like hating exercise and thinking that exercise had to be this extremely miserable thing.
Yeah, definitely. And that's tough, right? Because like, I mean, as a parent now, you want to kind of lead by example for your kid, but like they have to be able to find that way, right? Like, yeah, it's kind of like the old adage that if you want people to buy into something, you have to make them feel like it's their idea. And a lot of times with fitness, what happens is like people might have the best intentions, but they try to force feed one particular rhyme, one particular reason, one particular method. And it does create a lot of resistance to actually doing it because, like, let's be honest. I mean, we've exercised enough where like we enjoy the process, but for the vast majority of people who are just getting started, like the idea of working really hard to training muscles to failure, to sweating your ass off, to eating clean, whatever it is, like these aren't always fun things, and we have to get that kind of initial buy-in and be able to just get the ball rolling in the right direction if we ever hope to really create long-term sustainable habits. And so you went from this position of not really having a great experience overall with exercise and, with sports. It probably felt like a punishment to do the conditioning. I had a very rough, direct coach, we will say, that used to have us do a lot of football drills. It did not make conditioning or running fun at all in that case either. Yeah. But let's fast forward, man. Your background originally in college, it wasn't for fitness either, right? It became something that became a transformational component in your life as you entered adulthood. What was this like? Because I think a lot of times people have this preconceived notion that, especially in the fitness industry now, that coaches, that personal trainers, that health practitioners were always fit, were always healthy. The reality is it's often the complete opposite.
Yeah. I had no thought that I would be, helping people with their health and fitness one day. I was in business major and I worked in sports and thought that that's what I was going to do. And unfortunately, I was let go from a position. And during the time when I was really undergoing my own transformation and losing weight. And so at that time, I had a lot of people at the gym constantly asking me oh, what it is that you're doing. People who I would see every day who saw my transformation over the course of a couple of years. And so at that point, it became it was a natural transition at that point. And, it's funny looking back, to think how different my life probably would have been had I not decided to go that route at that time. Had I just decided I'm going to find another job in business or doing whatever, because pretty much everything that I have now, even trace to my girlfriend, Nicole, I can trace to having gotten into fitness. I never would have met her. Our paths would have never crossed had I not chosen the path of going down the fitness coaching route.
Yeah, no doubt. To be correct, you did not meet in one of our rambunctious nights running through the streets of Philly or elsewhere?
No, not there, no.
No. Okay. We got some stories, folks. We could go into those. We'll see where this conversation takes us. Might have to sign some NDAs before we jump into that, but love it, man. Love it. So, making this transformation for you, it happened in early adulthood. And as you started kind of going through this weight loss transition and you started to, focus on the exercise component first, let's talk about the diet side of things, because, you always hear people say, is it more diet? Is it more exercise? And well, it's both. They work in tandem. But let's talk about the nutrition side of things first, in terms of what you did and then how you would maybe approach things a little bit differently now. So what was your initial approach to your nutrition as you started getting committed to losing this weight? Were you tracking macros? Were you intermittent fasting? Were you doing anything in particular?
Yeah. So I definitely, I started out probably the way that a lot of people do, even my foray into nutrition in this sustainable transformation was a fad diet. It was something that somebody I think it was the HCG diet that somebody was at the gym was doing. And so it was you're eating 500 calories per day and eating, and taking these stupid, useless drops. And you eat 500 calories per day, you're going to lose weight. I realized quickly that was pretty unsustainable. And so I came across the first thing that really felt sustainable to me was actually intermittent fasting. And I came across an article from a mutual old friend of ours, John Romanello, on the process of intermittent fasting. And this was the first thing that really just sounded sustainable to me. Just don't eat breakfast. Okay, that's pretty simple. And so I did that for a while, saw some results. And as I went down that rabbit hole, learning more about that led me to Andy Morgan and counting macros. And so every little thing was kind of a step towards a more sustainable route. It just took me a long time to get there.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really interesting approach, right? Because, now there are these different tribes on fitness and people just bitch and moan back and forth on Instagram. Is it macros? Is it hormones? Is it you have too much of a toxic load from, whatever is going on in terms of your food choices and in terms of plastics? There's so many different pockets. And I think what's really interesting is you mentioned what actually got me started was the HCG diet. And the HCG diet, for those that don't know, basically it's you don't eat, you take, an HCG supplement. And of course, it helps blunt hunger to an extent, but you lose a lot of weight, you lose a lot of muscle first, or you lose a lot of muscle along the way. That's not the point. But the point is, sometimes even these methods that aren't practical, that aren't sustainable, become the launching point for interest in something else. And I think that's a really interesting thing, where on the bad side, some people jump into diets like this and they stay stuck because they don't really further their education on what works, what doesn't, and really reflect on the process. But at the same time, I also think back to like when I started getting serious about my own training, about nutrition, about all these different things. Man, I would like peel out these workouts from like Muscle and Fitness, these bodybuilding magazines, and have like 17 different exercises for my biceps. Meanwhile, I'm like 103 pounds and, can barely do a body weight squat. And so I was training the complete wrong way in the beginning. But you know what? Like, it got me going and it got me interested. And because that interest was really built, it allowed me to commit to learning the process itself. And so on one hand, and let me know if you feel the same way, like as a coach, like I hate seeing a lot of the ways that like fitness and health are marketed and brought up to people because there can be some negative side effects. But on the flip side, I always think about, well, you know what? Is it all 100% bad if it gets people to get hooked in to the point where they start to make those better informed decisions? It's kind of like both sides of the coin have their pluses and minuses, but I find that that's awesome to hear that you've got a story similar to that. And so you started with the HCG diet, then you jumped into more of an intermittent fasting approach, and then you took more of a macronutrient based approach. Let's elaborate on that, like, and look to where you are now. Like, are you still counting macros on a regular basis? Because listen, most people who lose weight gain it back. You've done a great job of losing the weight and keeping it off. So sustainability is a huge component here. Are you still tracking macros? Is it a little bit more of a intuitive approach now? What is that like?
Yeah, I track my macros most of the time. Blake's not listening to this. Blake West, our friend and coach. I probably don't track him as much as I should, but yeah, for me, like if I'm in a very focused phase of fat loss, wanting to build muscle, stuff like that, I'm going to track my macros most of the time. But also too, like people talk about it in an intuitive approach, but they don't really, I guess, have a good understanding of what that means because they don't have the awareness around different foods. And that, I think we both agree, is what is such a big benefit of tracking macros. It's not necessarily the fat loss or the muscle building or anything like that. It's the knowledge that you get from that sets the foundation for being able to eat intuitively, to know when you go out to eat, like approximately, how many proteins, carbs, and fats are in different food, or like what is a better choice than something else. And so I love tracking macros. I think it's a great teaching tool for the people who are willing to commit to it for a certain period of time. But intuitively eating is, something that I also support as well, as long as you are doing it from an educated standpoint.
Yeah, that's kind of a term that gets thrown out there a lot right now. Like, hey, I want to eat intuitively. And I think intuitive eating works if you know how to eat healthy and do it consistently. I think what happens is a lot of times people like, I don't want to track, or I don't want to do this thing. I want to eat intuitively, but they haven't shown the ability to eat intuitively and still maintain their health. It's like sometimes eating intuitively is going to be, I'm going to have that whole pizza and I'm going to have ice cream afterward. Right. Yeah. So it comes down to your intuition. And obviously with tracking macros, I think one of the things is like, it gives you data, and it's really hard to optimize anything if you don't have data. And One thing that we always say in our coaching is like, data directs decisions. And so it doesn't mean you have to track forever, but like tracking will build that awareness. It'll build that skill set. It'll build knowledge of like where your gaps are and where you need to improve to such a great extent. It just allows you to be very focused on your approach and get great results across the board. So that's awesome. I love to hear like just the way that your evolution has been. And it's not one thing that you have to do forever.
Right.
It's building a skill set.
Yeah. And I think that in terms of going back to eating intuitively, like a majority of people have been eating intuitively their entire lives. They just have poor intuition, because what does intuition come from? It comes from knowledge. It comes from experience. And if your only experience around food has been what you learned as a kid, or going out to eat all the time, or fast food or stuff like that, like you're going to have poor intuition. Like you can't eat intuitively until you know what healthy eating is based off of.
That's a banger right there. Intuitive eating only works when you know how to eat healthy and how to make decisions based on your previous experience. And I think that's an important component. I love that. Now, one thing, obviously, we've talked about the training side. You followed this approach. You had a very gradual, consistent weight loss, and you've been able to keep it off. What was your training like along the way? I mean, when you're doing the HCG diet and barely eating, like I can't imagine you had a whole lot of energy to really push weight.
Yeah, I mean, the same guy who like I got that diet from like gave me a workout program too. And it was like lifting weights. I think it was like 4 or 5 times per week. I don't remember exactly what it was, but at that point, like I had never really trained with weights before. So there was a lot of, like noob gains and noob strength and stuff like that. So, but I quickly learned like that wasn't sustainable. And so I really got into kind of around the time of like intermittent fasting, macro tracking, like, more of the powerlifting type squats, deadlifts, barbell bench press, and really for probably too long based all my training around those and just getting as strong as I could in those, in the basic lifts. And that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed training like that for a while, but eventually got to the point where I was just getting so beat up and unable to really push weight any further because I was trying to still lose fat at the same time. And it got to that point where like I couldn't chase both goals anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's an important perspective. It's in the beginning, you will make significant progress in almost every area of fitness if you're out of shape, deconditioned, whatever it is. What causes a lot of people to get stuck is they hold that same expectation as they get further down the path. But like anything else, progress really becomes a lot more incremental. And so like mentally, it's kind of a mind fuck to go from a place where it's like, I'm dropping 2 pounds a week. I'm dropping 2 pounds a week, or I'm getting stronger every week. I'm hitting a PR every week. My clothes fit better every week, to like, my deadlift went up 10 pounds in 9 months. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or like, hey, my weight stalled. My clothes are fitting a little bit better, but it's a lot slower. So what was like mentally when when the progress starts to slow down, like what did you tell yourself? How did you really like frame that in terms of sticking with that process?
Yeah, I mean, early on, I don't think I did a very good job at all. I think I talked about in that post I wrote the other day, like it took me 4 years to lose 100 pounds. And so there was a lot of instances where things would stall or progress would, not be good. And I would get frustrated. I would have periods of times where I just kind of like F it and would eat whatever. But the thing is, like, I always stuck with the training. No matter if I was like going off my diet or whatever like that, I always stuck with the workouts because, and I think you would agree with this too, like you get to a point where you start looking forward to that. It makes you feel good. And so like that was always, regardless of what was going on, if my diet or other areas of my life, stress, relationships, whatever, like that training was always my constant. And I could always count on that to kind of like pull me back into like the focus. And that's really what I think helped me be able to slowly lose that weight and then keep it off, because I had that one core habit that I really kind of built everything else around and could always fall back on.
Yeah, definitely. It's having that foundation, it's having that anchor. Mm-hmm. And, I think there's benefit in training because you want to look a certain way. But what most people realize along that journey is like the way that you feel as a result of doing the things that eventually lead you to look the way that you want is more impactful than what that end destination actually is.
Yeah.
Right. It was like, I didn't want to do interval training an hour ago. I did not want to go on the assault bike. It was not fun. But you know what? Damn. I feel good. I feel mentally refreshed. I feel dialed in. You're like, you know what? Like that's totally worth it. Yeah. And so by emphasizing kind of like the performance, and not just the performance with like weight in the gym, but like the performance of your body, the performance of your mindset, the benefit that you get as a result of putting in the work, when you start to frame that as the thing that you want to focus on, that creates such a shift that can lead to a bigger transformational experience. And so we've heard about your transformation, these shifts that you personally made. And now in your business, you've been coaching for over 10 years and you're an expert working with high performance entrepreneurs. And I know a lot of the things that you focus on regarding like stress management and, even internal health and these components are a big factor because, and please feel free to elaborate on this as much or as little as you want, but like you were in really good health and then you hit a really tough roadblock with your own health and that kind of reframed your overall approach to fitness. Can you dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that, in terms of like I had a great period for losing 100 pounds. And then I just kind of, over 4 or 5 years and had got to a place where I was just kind of like stuck. Like I was still getting stronger in the gym and working out and stuff like that. But like, despite sleeping well, just wasn't feeling good, eating good. And so like, I really wanted to dig into like figure out why. And like I've worked with tons of coaches over the last 12 years and, working with one of our close friends, Alex Mullen, like working with a coach who was able to like give me more insight into my health and not just about the weight part, but about how you feel, how you perform, looking at blood work, doing deep and bridging the gaps between what affects your energy levels, what affects your sleep, how all these things integrate into each other really gave me a perspective of like, oh, it's not just about looking good. It's about feeling good and performing your best too. And when you talk about working with people who are high performers in high demanding jobs and stuff like that, that comes with a lot of stress. It comes with a lot of like limited time and, the not really understanding how all these things fit into someone's performance, their health. And so just with our clients, really what we try to do is really give them a deeper understanding of how all these things work together. what are the things that affect your energy? What are the things that affect how you think during the day, how you perform, how you sleep at night? Things like little known things like digestive health and what, people are suffering from digestive issues, what all affects that, and just trying to help clients really understand the entire picture of their health. Because a lot of people, I think you would agree, are often just focused on like health and fitness through like the weight loss perspective or the how you look, the aesthetic perspective. And it just goes so much farther.
Yeah, no doubt.
Beyond that.
Yeah. Like one thing that we really emphasize within our coaching is what we call synergy. And synergy is that balance between like your training, your nutrition, your lifestyle. And I think what happens right now, because there's so much information out there, people do great at collecting a lot of ideas on any one like training methodology, nutrition protocol, but where people struggle is to how to actually synthesize and put the right things together. It's like people have a lot of good puzzle pieces, but they don't know what puzzle they're actually trying to put together, And so let's handle like a few of those step by step. Let's say I come to you and say, yeah, Jordan, like I want to be able to perform better physically and mentally. 35 years old. I run a business. I don't get a ton of sleep all the time. Stress is gradually pretty high. And digestive wise, like, sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm not. I get the bubblies. Like what type of things like do you focus on from a digestive health perspective? And why is like digestive health important, not just for like nutrient assimilation, but like cognitive performance?
Yeah, I think, one of the first areas that I'm sure you do too, that we look at is sleep, because there's so much like sleep is going to affect every single thing from our training performance to digestive health to stress management and stuff like that. So, looking at somebody's sleep is always the first part we'll look at if they're suffering from performance issues, stress issues, and really seeing, are there things that we can do that are going to help them get the opportunity for a better night's sleep? Because you can't just, like I always say, like you're not going to improve your sleep overnight. It's kind of like a little joke, because it's something that takes time, but it is something that is so important in every other area of your life. It's something we can't. And so always looking at that first, then taking a look at their diet, because I would say after sleep, in terms of how we feel on a daily basis, what you're putting in your body is going to be the next most influential thing. You say garbage in, garbage out. If you're putting crap food and a bunch of coffee every single day, a bunch of alcohol multiple times per week, fast food or eating out, all these type of things, like you are probably not going to feel very well. And that's probably going to translate into digestive health, because like you said, not only is that important for being able to assimilate nutrients and feel your workouts, feel your muscles, but like majority of our immune system is located within our gut as well. And so much the different things in terms of like dopamine and all these feel-good hormones, these things that help our brains perform at their best, are connected to our gut as well. And so like gut health is a very important piece of the overall puzzle. And I saw this the other day on Twitter. I think it was somebody just had like the tweet. It's like, it's wild how, people get to adulthood and just think all of a sudden it's okay to have all these issues with food that you never had before. And that's just one of like, we go back to talking about connecting those dots. Like a lot of people just think things like that are normal, when in reality, we really shouldn't be suffering from those type of issues on a regular basis.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think a lot of people don't even realize sometimes in terms of digestion and food, how much it impacts different areas of their lives, right? Like just for a second, sit here and think, how do you feel when you can't take a shit? Your stomach probably hurts. You're probably in a bad mood.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel on the flip side, like when everything is running through you? Oh my gosh, I've been in the bathroom 8 times today. I can't get any work done. I can't get any focus done. Right. Like these are like things that, we can kind of joke about, but they're one, indicative of much larger problems. But like second, like there are second and third order consequences to not having your health dialed in. And think about like how those affect your mood, how those things affect, your productivity in these different areas. And so I think that's why dialing in things like your health can be such an important aspect of performing your best, because it improves your body down to the cellular level. Interestingly enough, man, like you mentioned, like sleep, I saw this study. It was posted by Menno Henselmans earlier this week on Instagram, and it was a updated Chicago sleep study. So one, there was a Chicago sleep study done years ago that looked at testosterone levels in men, and it was when men have 5 hours of sleep or less for 5 days in a row, testosterone levels drop by 20%. I know a lot of people that sleep 5 to 6 hours a day for years on end. And then their hormones are completely trashed and they wonder why their body won't change even when they're working hard. It's like, that's one interesting component. But this most recent one was actually looking at the difference between getting that 5 hours of sleep or somebody averaging 7.5. And what they found, don't quote me verbatim on like the exact numbers, but it was a 50% reduction in fat loss when averaging 5 hours of sleep or less, and a 50% increase in muscle loss while in a calorie deficit while getting 5 hours of sleep or less. So like, think about that for a second. by not optimizing sleep from a body composition perspective, you're losing fat at half the rate, and you're probably going to have a lot more cravings, a lot less energy, and you're losing lean tissue, which slows down your metabolism and will lead to plateaus, and then you won't look as good, right? And so we think about how important sleep and stress and digestion really are just on a baseline level. And like we talk about it, and it gets a lot more attention, specifically thanks to a lot of different podcasts that are out there and things that have covered it. I'm not sure how much we should jump into some of those individual podcasts, given the current news status right now. Huberman, all this, that's another story. Yeah. But like, it's just incredible how much of a factor that these things can play in. And so let's dig into the digestion side a little bit more. What are some baseline things that you do to improve digestion? Do you recommend any food tests or like certain foods that you tend to find are common allergens for most people?
Food tests are typically something I might recommend after a lot of the lifestyle things, because for most people, and a lot of digestive issues come down to stress, just a crappy diet in general, not getting enough nutrients, not getting enough fiber. That is a big one. That's why one of the basic things I have clients focus on with their nutrition is fiber intake. But sleep, stress management, making sure like they're doing the core area things correctly as well. And then, kind of doing what I would say is like, a food journal, food review, like whatever, like start taking notes on like when people like feel a certain way. Like if you have certain issues with foods like bloating or, that's why one of the things we look at in our check-ins is like constipation or, just digestion throughout the week, like just getting more and more feedback, because digestion is a very complex subject. And I don't pretend that I know everything about it or have all the answers, but it really comes down to just like having a deductive working backwards process, like identifying what foods might be causing issues, when you might be having those issues. If it's, if you're eating too close to a workout, that might stress your digestion. So it's really just taking an in-depth dive into somebody's lifestyle and just taking these different pieces and say like, okay, we're noticing like continuing to have issues after eating, maybe dairy or something like that. Why don't we try cutting that out for a while and see how that affects them and then kind of work off from there. But it's really a very individualized process. But I would say like for most people, start with the basics: sleep, stress management, hydration is a big one, fiber intake is a big one, and then go from there. But those are the basics that I definitely want people concerned about first.
Yeah, focus on the big rocks before you focus on the little pebbles and kind of get those things dialed in. Yeah. I mean, that's all great advice. It's like just taking a little bit of time to reflect back and like, how am I feeling after this? Like, is my stomach upset today? Like, well, yeah, maybe you're eating like, way too close to bedtime. And it's not that eating close to bedtime, like, causes any issues with weight gain or anything like that, unless you're over consuming calories. Just a classic example of like your organs need a break. And if you eat a giant meal and then you lay on your back, like your digestion is going to be negatively impaired, going into that next day. And so it becomes a lot of those like baseline things that make a huge, huge difference in the overall approach. You mentioned stress management a number of times. I think fair to say it's a more stressful world now as of this recording in 2024 than it has been. I mean, the last 5 years, I'd say, have just been kind of a increasing pit of stress in general in the Western world, probably worldwide. What are the things that you emphasize when it comes to stress management, particularly for that busy executive who's working 40, 50, 60 hours a week?
Yeah. I mean, I hate to keep beating the dead horse, or maybe the horse is asleep, because sleep is the most important component. Sleep is the best stress management tool that we have. Sleep helps manage cortisol levels. It promotes more testosterone, which, is an antagonist of cortisol, and the inverse relationship there, so always saying, maintaining a good sleep schedule, and even if that means like you said, working a lot, even if that means like, okay, maybe you can only get 6 hours of sleep per night, not ideal, but as long as you're being consistent with that, like, okay, we can work from that. From there, I think a lot of people don't really realize how much stress they're putting on their bodies is through exercise and through their training. Like, yes, exercise is a very good thing. It's a very healthy thing. But like anything, too much of something becomes unhealthy. And exercise, as good as it is a stress on your body. And if you are placing too much stress on your body from any source, like that will create problems. And the one thing about exercise is it's the one stress that we really have the most control over. You can't always control if you have a great night of sleep. You can't control if your boss is going to come into your office and call you an idiot one day or whatever it might be. You can't control other people and the stresses that those things bring into your life, but you can control the stress of training. And for a lot of busy, high-performing people who like to push themselves, this can be the hardest thing for them to kind of take that opposite approach on and scale back their time. But often find when they do, have more energy, they recover better, they sleep better because we've reduced this stress load on their body, and that's the easiest way to because when we talk about stress management, from other sources, that's a lot harder. And so we want to start with the easiest thing and making sure that we're helping people manage stress and also teach them good habits too along the way when it comes to stress management.
Yeah. What types of exercise tend to be maybe most problematic for increasing overall stress for these types of people?
Yeah, I would say like the high intensity stuff, like high intensity intervals. I find that people tend to overdo those type of things a lot. And it's not necessarily, again, that those are bad, but your body can only handle so much stress. Your body can only recover from so much stress, especially if you're somebody who maybe can't sleep very well or doesn't have the opportunity to sleep very well. Like sleep is when you recover from your exercise. And if that's compromised, then your exercise is going to be compromised. So do you really think adding more is going to be like adding more of that stress is going to be a healthy thing? So, I find that it's just often comes down to just people just doing more than they need to. Like they think they have to be in the gym every single day. Like you have to be doing 75 hard, 365 days a year in the gym type of thing. Like it's like most
365 hard, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Most people just don't have, they see exercise as this good thing, but they don't also understand that there is negative consequences to too much of a good thing as well.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's just one of those things where I think especially when people are busy, they're trying to find what's going to be most efficient. And a lot of what's been drilled into people's heads is like, well, if you do high intensity interval training, you're going to have higher EPOC, so exercise post-oxygen consumption, which means you burn more calories even when you're at rest to an extent. But one, cardiovascular exercise inherently gets less effective from a calorie burning perspective the more that we do it. I think that's one thing that people don't really realize. It doesn't mean that it's bad, but I think cardiovascular type of exercise for the sake of burning calories is a really poor way to build a good, healthy body. Like it can help, but it's kind of an ancillary benefit, not a primary benefit. And if it drives stress up further, you get more cravings, you get more overall stress, and it makes it harder to do the things that are actually going to lead to some of the body composition changes that you're looking for. So it's like, to me, one thing I always like to think about is like, what is the trigger that this type of training is creating inside of our body? Like, what is the actual trigger? So resistance training, what is it doing? It's triggering muscle protein synthesis. It's triggering the formation of stronger bones, tissues, joints, ligaments, building more power production inside your body. It's not, you're building muscle and you're going to burn more calories because you're building muscle, but it's not like I look at training from the perspective, resistance training from the perspective of like, how many calories will I burn in this workout? Yeah. Right. It's like, no, like what are the actual benefits that's going to lead to a change in the overall structure of my body? And then cardiovascular exercise too. It's like, what is the adaptation that's going to happen inside my body here? And then keeping in mind, like, okay, now how does this factor in with the stress? Because if we're adding more stress, your body can't differentiate that shit. Whether it's because you got cut off in traffic, your boss called you an idiot, you got 5 hours of sleep last night, whatever it is, like your body, it all pulls that stress into the same thing and it impacts your body, really across the board. So I think that's a crucial perspective. Now, Jordan, another big benefit of yours is sports. And you live close enough to Vegas, you can make some trips out there, man. Like, tell me a little bit more, like, how'd you get into like the sports betting side of things?
I grew up you grew up in Wisconsin too. So like sports, obviously a big thing there, local taverns, the local hole in the wall bars and stuff like that. They always have these, kind of gambling type, illegal things that you can do and stuff like that, rip tickets and all these other whatever things. So they would have parlay cards where, you
pull tabs.
Yeah. So they have these parlay cards for NFL and college football, and a bunch of people that I work with and that knew from my baseball days, every fall we would each pick a team and throw $5 on the card and try to, hit the big 20-1 shot or something like that. And so I was doing that long before I got into like actual sports betting. And then I moved to Colorado, who was one of I think the first 5 states to actually legalize sports betting, and right before COVID. And just got into it there, and it just
man, you were my bookie.
Exactly. And so I've always enjoyed sports, but betting on sports because I don't want to just bet to bet, and I want to try to win money. And so in my pastime, it's like helped me enjoy sports more because it's helped me enjoy sports from a different perspective and like learning more about like the ins and outs of like what makes a good football team versus a bad team. And like, just looking at trends and all this like statistics, where in college I hated statistics, but if they had taught it from like a sports betting perspective, I probably would have majored in it. I mean, but yeah, it's just,
like teach me, you know what? Like if I would have been taught math, like, hey, if you learn this math, like this is how you're going to make money. Like that would have been a lot more enticing than just learning math to try to get a B, right? So totally get that. So like from analyzing the numbers, I mean, you've been a lifelong sports fan. I mean, anyone who hasn't like spent time or growing up in Wisconsin, it's tough to explain because the weather's so shitty for a long part of the year that like you just love every sports team and like that is the thing to do. I think people normally think about like the beer drinking and cheese and all that stuff. Like, it's ancillary, but like such a huge sports state out of all the ones that I've lived in, like that's by far like the biggest passion just in general sports. But when you look at sports from a outsider's perspective, you try to take your emotional attachment directly probably outside of the team and you probably have to look at numbers like what does this actually mean? How has that helped you in regards to coaching? Because individually, we all have different methods that we've used that we probably struggle to be impartial about because it works so well for us. There's an emotional attachment. Yeah. Has it made you a better coach to actually get into the world of like sports betting, just the way that you look at numbers and analyze?
I think, not just necessarily a better coach, but just I think, I don't want to say a better human, but just better like ability to, I think, go through life less stressed, I would say, in terms of stuff. Like, I think the ability to look at things from different perspectives is something severely lacking in our world in general. And I think over the last couple of years, if anything that I've learned from betting sports, it's to just look at things from like, it's not always just about like one point of view. It's not always just about one thing. There's a multitude of factors that go into everything. And that includes, fitness, like, and that goes back to saying like, how we look at, we're not just looking at like, oh, client didn't lose weight this week, they must not be hitting their macros. Well, okay, maybe they aren't hitting their macros, but why aren't they hitting their macros? Or, were they not drinking their water this week? Did they not sleep very well and must maybe have more inflammation or under more stress? And so, I just think like too often, whether it's in fitness or business or life, we kind of just get on this, maybe one track mind or try to look at things as like black and white, when I was just talking about this with somebody the other day, like 99% of everything exists in this gray area. And you have to be able to look at things from different perspectives in order to be able to get the entire picture. And I just think like being able to do that with sports betting has just kind of translated, I can see, to other areas of my life as well.
That's really, it's really cool insight. And you had me thinking, as we said this, I mean, if we want to roll back to 2021 Packers versus Tampa Bay, I would like to think that Green Bay was actually the better team, but it was a very poor matchup directly for them.
Yeah.
And just using this as an example, whether you agree with this or not, that's kind of what it's like when people are picking different exercise programs. Like, you might have the best exercise program here, but if it's not a good matchup, aka if it's not in alignment with all these other areas of your life, like, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Right. It's like a lot of times in football, it's not the best team that wins. It's the team that gets the best matchups and stays the healthiest.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with fitness. It's not about the person who has the best X's and O's routine or any of that. It's like who can stick with it consistently and who can probably navigate the changes in life, aka like the scheme they're playing against, and still be able to stay true to their values. And I think that's an important perspective to take when it comes to sports betting, but more importantly, fitness. Jordan, thank you so much for your time, man. Where can we find out more about you?
Yeah. So you can find more about me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. Just Jordan Pagel. You can find us at our website, sustainhealthperformance.com. Yeah, I think those are the main places. LinkedIn is where I hang out a lot, so that's a fun platform. If you just think it's sort of for resumes and networking, it's actually it's a pretty fun place to be.
Yeah, it's definitely growing. And if we want to see your sports insights, where can we find out more about you there?
Well, I'm not going to plug anything that I can't stay consistent with right now. Sometimes I'll write. I'm too busy with business, fortunately and unfortunately right now, to kind of get too much into the sports stuff. But occasionally on Twitter, I'll have sports takes or stuff like that. So
awesome. Well, I always enjoy your takes. I always enjoy it. But you know what? We're kind of in the quiet season. So awesome, man. I appreciate you being here. And guys, make sure you go check out Jordan. He is an absolutely 100% genuine human being, fantastic at what he does, and will provide a lot of value for you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Hey, it's Eric here again. Now, there are 3 ways that I can help you look great naked. Number 1, if you want to grab a free copy of the Look Great Naked protocol to help you lose body fat without counting calories, then go to bachperformance.com/free training. Number 2, if you're a busy guy looking to build muscle, then I recommend checking out our Minimalist Muscle Blitz, which has helped over 1,000 men build muscle without living in the gym. Just go to minimalistmuscleblitz.com. The link will also be available in the show notes. Or number 3, and last, if you want to work with me directly and get the best results possible, apply at bachperformance.com/coaching to look great naked without living in the gym. Until next time, my friend,